The scream pierced through the torrential downpour. Inside the luxurious Westlake mansion, 6-year-old Emma Wilson clutched her stuffed penguin as Victoria Fraser dragged her toward the front door. Thunder cracked across the sky, momentarily illuminating the terror in the child's eyes. "Please, Daddy, I'll be good," Emma cried, her small feet scraping against the marble floor. A thin trail of crimson trickled from her forehead where she had struck the corner of the mahogany credenza during the struggle. Robert Wilson stood in the center of the grand foyer, his 6-foot frame swaying slightly. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the light from the chandelier above amber liquid, sloshing dangerously close to the rim. His once handsome face was now a mask of indifference, blue eyes clouded by whiskey and something darker. "You're not my daughter anymore." He slurred, his voice hollow. "Get out." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand tightened around Emma's thin wrist. At 32, Victoria exuded the confidence of a woman who knew precisely what she wanted. Her designer dress hugged curves that had ensnared Robert from the moment they met 6 months ago, barely 3 months after Catherine's funeral. "She was going through your safe, Robert," Victoria whispered, her voice honeyed poison. "She knows about our money." Emma's eyes widened. "No, I didn't touch anything. Daddy, please." Victoria yanked the front door open, revealing the storm raging outside. With a calculated shove, she pushed Emma onto the rain-soaked porch. The child stumbled, falling hard onto her knees. Her backpack burst open, scattering rain-soaked drawings and a small locket across the steps. "You're lying," Emma sobbed, rain instantly soaking through her thin cotton dress. "Daddy, she's lying." Robert took another long drink, draining the glass. For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes, recognition perhaps, or the ghost of the father he once was. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Victoria stooped beside Emma, her smile sharp as a blade. She plucked the stuffed penguin from the child's desperate grip, examining it with theatrical disgust. "This filthy thing," she murmured, just loud enough for Emma to hear. "Your mother had terrible taste." With deliberate cruelty, she tossed Penji into a muddy puddle forming at the bottom of the steps, then pressed her heel into its worn fabric. Emma lunged for her beloved toy, slipping on the wet stone. Her head struck the railing, opening a small cut above her eye. Blood mingled with rain and tears as she crawled toward Penji. Mrs. Hernandez, the housekeeper, appeared at the doorway behind Robert, horror evident on her face. "Mr. Wilson, you cannot do this. The little one, she is bleeding." Robert turned, his face contorted with sudden rage. "You're fired. Get out or I'll call the police." The housekeeper retreated, making the sign of the cross. Victoria closed the door, sealing Emma outside in the storm. The rain intensified, washing blood from Emma's face in pale pink rivulets. She gathered Penji into her arms, the stuffed penguin, now sodden and filthy. Thunder boomed overhead, causing her to flinch and curl tighter around her only remaining connection to her mother. "Mom," she whispered to the storm. "Mom, please help me." Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating Emma in their harsh glow. A Rolls-Royce Ghost, midnight, black and gleaming, despite the rain, pulled to a precise stop at the curb. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rear door opened, and a tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the car's interior light. Maxwell Grant stepped into the rain without hesitation, seemingly unconcerned about the damage to his bespoke suit. At 55, he commanded attention through presence alone. His steel-gray hair remained impeccable, even as raindrops collected on his shoulders. He surveyed the scene before him, taking in the sprawled child, the scattered belongings, the blood mixing with rain. Mrs. Hernandez had emerged from the side entrance of the house and hurried toward him, clutching her coat around her shoulders. "That child," Maxwell said, his voice barely audible above the storm. "She's Catherine's daughter." The housekeeper nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Mr. Maxwell, they throw her out like garbage. The girlfriend, she is the devil." Maxwell's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in his eyes, a cold fury crystallizing behind the calm facade. Without another word, he approached Emma, who shrank back against the railing. The CEO of Grand Empire, a man who regularly concluded 9-figure deals without blinking, knelt beside the terrified child. He removed his silk pocket square and gently dabbed at the blood on her forehead. His movements were precise, almost clinical, yet conveyed an unexpected gentleness. "Hello, Emma," he said, his deep voice somehow cutting through the storm without raising its volume. "My name is Maxwell Grant. I was a friend of your mother's." Emma clutched Penji tighter, uncertain. How do you know my name? Your mother spoke of you often. Maxwell carefully collected the scattered papers and the locket, placing them into the backpack. She was very proud of you. The front door flew open. Robert Wilson stumbled onto the porch, another drink in hand. His angry retort died in his throat as recognition dawned. Grant, he stammered, suddenly sobering. What the hell are you doing here? Maxwell rose slowly to his full height, positioning himself between Emma and her father. The two men locked eyes across the rain-soaked space between them. Wilson, Maxwell acknowledged, his tone glacial. I see your business practices extend to your personal life as well, disposing of inconvenient assets without consideration of their value. Robert's face drained of color. 3 years ago, Maxwell Grant had systematically dismantled Wilson Development's largest project after discovering Robert had cut corners on building safety. The bankruptcy that followed would have destroyed Robert completely had Catherine not intervened, convincing Maxwell to allow Robert a path to rebuild. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her predatory smile faltering as she assessed the newcomer. Who is this Robert? She demanded, placing a possessive hand on Robert's arm. Maxwell ignored her, turning his attention back to Emma. He removed his suit jacket and gently draped it around her small shoulders. It engulfed her completely, but provided immediate warmth. From now on, you will come with me, he told Emma, his voice leaving no room for argument. No one has the right to treat Catherine's daughter this way. Robert took an unsteady step forward. You can't take her. She's my daughter, Maxwell cut in Arctic contempt in each syllable. A moment ago you declared otherwise. I heard you quite clearly. Victoria tugged at Robert's sleeve, whispering urgently, Don't let him take her. She knows too much about our plans. Maxwell's sharp hearing caught the whisper, filing the information away. He extended his hand to Emma, who hesitated only briefly before placing her small cold fingers in his large palm. The authorities will be in touch, Wilson, Maxwell said, guiding Emma toward the waiting car. I suggest you prepare a very compelling explanation for why your daughter was bleeding on your doorstep during a thunderstorm. As they walked away, Emma glanced back at the only home she'd known. Through the rain, she saw Victoria's triumphant smile quickly masked when she noticed the child watching. Emma tightened her grip on Maxwell's hand. The Rolls-Royce door opened automatically as they approached. Maxwell helped Emma inside, ensuring she was seated comfortably before closing the door and walking around to the other side. The interior smelled of expensive leather and subtle cologne. The rain became a distant drumming against the roof. Williams, Maxwell addressed his driver, please take us home. Yes, sir, the chauffeur responded, pulling away from the curb. Emma sat rigidly, Penji clutched to her chest, Maxwell's enormous jacket still around her shoulders. Blood had dried on her forehead, and her dress was soaked through. She shivered despite the car's warmth. You're safe now, Maxwell stated, not as comfort, but as fact. He pressed a button, and a hidden compartment revealed a first aid kit. With practiced movements, he cleaned the cut on her forehead. This doesn't need stitches, but we'll have Dr. Matthews check it when we arrive. Why are you helping me? Emma asked, her small voice stronger than expected. Maxwell paused, considering the child with newfound respect for her directness. 15 years ago, your mother saved me from a scandal that would have destroyed everything I built. When she became ill, I promised to watch over you if anything happened to her. Emma processed this information with a maturity beyond her years. Did you know my dad before? A muscle in Maxwell's jaw tightened. Yes, our paths crossed in business. He wasn't always like this, Emma whispered, looking down at Penji. Not before Mom died. Maxwell said nothing, allowing the child in her memories without contradiction. The car turned onto the private road leading to his estate in the Hamptons, massive iron gates opening automatically as they approached. Grant Manor spread before them, a modernist interpretation of classic architecture. Glass and stone merged seamlessly across 3 stories, illuminated tastefully against the night. Perfectly manicured grounds extended in every direction, ending at cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. As the car came to a stop under its covered entrance, Emma's eyes widened. You live here alone? With staff, Maxwell replied, exiting the vehicle. He opened Emma's door himself, dismissing the butler who had appeared. Mrs. Reynolds, my housekeeper, has prepared a room for you. Emma climbed out, still clutching Penji. How did you know to come tonight? Maxwell guided her into the house. I didn't. I was coming to speak with your father about Catherine's estate. The timing was providential. The foyer of Grant Manor soared 3 stories high, dominated by a spiral staircase that seemed to float without support. Modern art adorned walls of warm oak and cool stone. Despite its grandeur, the space felt strangely empty, a showcase rather than a home. Mrs. Reynolds, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a neat bun, approached with quiet efficiency. Her expression softened at the sight of Emma. "The blue suite is ready, sir," she informed Maxwell. "I've laid out some clothes that might fit Miss Wilson, and a bath has been drawn." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." Maxwell nodded. "Please call Dr. Matthews. I'd like him to examine Emma tonight." "Already done, sir. He'll arrive within 30 minutes." Maxwell turned to Emma. "Mrs. Reynolds will show you to your room. After the doctor's visit, we can discuss next steps." Emma tightened her grip on his hand. "Will you have to give me back to him?" The question hung in the air, weighted with fear. Maxwell knelt to meet her eyes. "No," he said simply. "You will not return to that house unless you wish to, and only when I am certain you will be safe. You have my word." Relief washed over Emma's face. She released his hand and followed Mrs. Reynolds toward the staircase. At the base of the steps, she turned back. "Thank you, Mr. Grant," she said formally as Catherine had taught her. Maxwell inclined his head slightly. "Rest now, Emma. Tomorrow will bring enough challenges." After they disappeared upstairs, Maxwell moved to his study, a space of leather and mahogany with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, but didn't drink immediately. Instead, he moved to a small safe concealed behind a rotating bookshelf, entering a complex combination from memory. Inside lay a worn photograph of Maxwell with his late wife Elizabeth, their daughter Sophia, and a younger Catherine Wilson at a company picnic. All 3 women were laughing at something beyond the camera's view, while Maxwell himself looked on with rare unguarded affection. His phone rang, breaking the silence. The caller ID showed Grant Empire Legal. "Grant," he answered curtly. "Sir," came the measured voice of his chief counsel. "I've received disturbing information about Robert Wilson's finances. There appear to be numerous irregularities in the handling of Catherine's estate. The trust fund established for Emma may have been compromised." Maxwell's expression hardened. "Investigate thoroughly. I want a complete report by morning." "Sir, there's something else. Catherine's death certificate lists cancer as the cause, but our source at Memorial Hospital indicates toxicology tests were ordered posthumously. The results were sealed." Maxwell's hand tightened around the glass. "Find those results, whatever it takes." "Understood, sir." Maxwell ended the call and finally took a measured sip of scotch. The photograph remained in his other hand, a window to a time when his world still contained light. "I will keep my promise, Catherine," he whispered to the empty room. Upstairs, Emma sat on the edge of an enormous 4-poster bed, now bathed and dressed in silk pajamas that Mrs. Reynolds had somehow procured. The room was larger than the entire upstairs of her father's house, decorated in shades of blue and cream. The adjoining bathroom contained a tub big enough to swim in. Dr. Matthews, a kind-faced man with salt and pepper hair, had examined her thoroughly, confirming no serious injuries. He'd left butterfly bandages on her forehead and instructions for Mrs. Reynolds about concussion monitoring. Despite the luxury surrounding her, Emma couldn't stop shivering. She held Penji, now clean and dried by Mrs. Reynolds' efficient ministrations. The stuffed penguin had been with her since her 4th birthday, the last one her mother had been well enough to celebrate. "It's too quiet here," she told Penji, her voice small in the vast room. "And too big." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Reynolds entered carrying a silver tray with warm milk and cookies. "I thought you might need something sweet before sleep," the housekeeper said kindly. "Growing girls need proper nourishment, especially after difficult days." Emma accepted the milk gratefully. "Thank you. Is Mr. Grant always so serious?" Mrs. Reynolds arranged the pillows with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Grant has known great sorrow, Miss Emma. He lost his wife and daughter 10 years ago. Since then, he's focused entirely on his company." "What happened to them?" "An accident," Mrs. Reynolds said simply. "It changed him. Before he smiled often. Now," she trailed off, then straightened, "but having you here might be good for him too. Your mother was one of the few people he truly respected." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Emma sipped her milk and contemplated her new circumstances. The events of the evening seemed surreal, like one of the fairy tales her mother used to read to her. Except in the tree was stories, it was always the child who was rescued by someone kind and good. Emma wasn't sure yet what kind of man Maxwell Grant was, only that he wasn't her father. The thought of Robert sent a fresh wave of pain through her chest. How could he have changed so much? After her mother died, he'd slowly withdrawn, drinking more, working less. Then Victoria arrived and everything accelerated. Emma set aside her empty cup and crawled under the plush covers, arranging Penji beside her. The bed was too soft, the room too unfamiliar. She left the bedside lamp on, unwilling to face the darkness in this strange place. "Mom," she whispered into the quiet room, "I miss you." Sleep eventually claimed her, but brought no rest. In her dreams, she was falling with no one to catch her. In his study, Maxwell reviewed security footage from cameras he'd had installed around Wilson's property months ago, a precaution after Catherine's suspicious death. He watched the evening's events unfold with clinical detachment, noting every detail: Victoria's calculated cruelty, Robert's drunken indifference, Emma's desperate pleas. His phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in years. "Benjamin," he answered, surprise evident in his voice. "It's been a long time." "Not by accident," came the gruff reply. Benjamin Hayes, once the most feared litigator on the East Coast, had retreated from public life after a controversial case 5 years earlier. But Catherine's daughter changes things. Maxwell's brow furrowed. "How did you know about Emma?" "Catherine made me executor of a secondary will. In the event of foul play, it supersedes the one Robert knows about." A pause. "I've been watching Maxwell, just as she asked me to. Why didn't you intervene sooner?" "I needed evidence. Tonight provided it." Benjamin's tone hardened. "Victoria Fraser isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Vanessa Mitchell. Does that name mean anything to you?" Maxwell searched his memory. "No. It should. She's the younger sister of Edward Mitchell." And the glass slipped from Maxwell's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Edward Mitchell had been driving the truck that crashed into Elizabeth and Sophia's car 10 years ago. The official report called it an accident. Maxwell had never believed it. "That's impossible," he whispered. "I have facial recognition confirmation. She's surgically altered her appearance, but DNA doesn't lie." Benjamin's voice was grim. "This isn't about Robert or money. It's about you, Maxwell. Always has been." "Emma," Maxwell realized with sudden clarity, "she's using the child to get to me." "Precisely, and she'll try to get her back. We have maybe 30 days before the trust fund activates and legal proceedings become complicated." Maxwell moved to the window, staring out at the storm still raging over the ocean. "What do we do, Bombing?" "We fight," Benjamin stated simply. "I'll handle legal preparations. You focus on keeping Emma safe and gathering evidence against Victoria, or Vanessa rather. And Maxwell, watch your back. If she's willing to harm a child to get to you, there's no limit to what she might do." After ending the call, Maxwell remained at the window, thoughts racing. The pieces were aligning into a pattern too deliberate to be coincidence. Catherine's illness, her sealed toxicology report, Victoria's appearance in Robert's life so soon after the funeral, and now Emma traumatized and vulnerable. His intercom buzzed. "Sir," came Mrs. Reynolds' voice. "Miss Emma is having nightmares. Should I wake her?" "No," Maxwell decided after a moment. "I'll come up." He found Emma thrashing in her sleep, small whimpers escaping her lips. Penji had fallen to the floor. Maxwell retrieved the stuffed penguin, then gently placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma," he said softly, "you're safe. It's just a dream." She woke with a start, eyes wild with terror. For a moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then reality rushed back, and with it fresh tears. "He threw me away," she sobbed. "My own dad threw me away." Maxwell stood awkwardly beside the bed, unused to comforting children. He offered Penji, which Emma clutched gratefully. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people make terrible choices when they're in pain. It doesn't excuse what your father did, but it might help explain it." Emma wiped her eyes. "He changed after Mom died. He used to carry me on his shoulders and tell me stories. He called me his princess." Her voice broke. "Now he can't even look at me." Maxwell considered his next words carefully. "Grief affects people differently. Some, like your father, try to escape it through alcohol or distractions. Others, like me, bury themselves in work. Is that why you're alone? Because you're sad too?" The direct question caught him off guard. Maxwell rarely discussed his personal tragedy even with his closest advisors. Yet something about Emma's straightforward inquiry broke through his practiced reserve. "Yes," he admitted, After I lost my family, being alone seemed easier than feeling their absence everywhere. Emma studied him with those two perceptive eyes. Doesn't it get lonely? Loneliness becomes familiar after a time, like an old scar that occasionally aches but no longer bleeds. Maxwell straightened. You should try to sleep again. Could you? Emma hesitated. Could you leave the door open, just a little? Maxwell nodded. Of course. As he turned to leave, Emma's small voice stopped him. Mr. Grant, will they try to make me go back? Maxwell faced her, his expression resolute. Listen carefully, Emma. I make and break billion-dollar deals before breakfast. I control companies that influence global markets. I have resources most people cannot imagine. He paused, ensuring she understood. No one will take you anywhere you don't want to go, not while I'm breathing. The simple declaration appeared to comfort her more than any elaborate reassurance could have. Emma nodded and settled back against the pillows Pingy secure in her arms. Maxwell left her door slightly ajar and returned to his study. The storm outside had begun to subside, but he knew a greater tempest was brewing. Victoria knew Vanessa would not relinquish her plans easily. Whatever game she was playing had been years in the making. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. His executive assistant had sent the preliminary report on Wilson's finances. The irregularities were worse than expected. Robert had been systematically draining company assets for months, with large sums transferring to offshore accounts linked to shell corporations. Maxwell moved to his desk and pressed the intercom. Williams, prepare the car for tomorrow morning. We'll be leaving for the office at 6. Yes, sir, came the immediate response. Maxwell then called his head of security. Jensen, I need a complete protection detail for the estate starting immediately. No one enters or exits without my direct authorization. And I want a background check on everyone who's had contact with Robert Wilson in the last year. Understood, sir. I'll handle it personally. Maxwell ended the call and returned to the window. Dawn was still hours away, but his mind raced with preparations. Tomorrow would bring a board meeting. He couldn't postpone the Japanese investment deal required his personal attention. Yet for the first time in a decade, business seemed secondary to a more immediate concern. He thought of Emma sleeping fitfully upstairs, Catherine's daughter, a child who had already lost her mother and in many ways her father as well. A pawn in some elaborate revenge plot he was only beginning to understand. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, a man accustomed to power, but unfamiliar with vulnerability. Taking in Emma had been instinctive, a promise kept to Catherine. But it would complicate everything personally and professionally. The board would question his judgment, competitors would sense weakness, Vanessa would escalate her plans. Maxwell's phone rang once more. The Grand Empire Operations Center never slept. Sir, his CFO began without preamble, the Japanese are threatening to pull out. They've received information suggesting instability in our leadership. They're demanding your personal assurance at tomorrow's meeting, or they'll take the deal to Westbrook International. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. The Japanese deal represented $2 billion in immediate investment and potential expansion worth 10 times that amount. His absence would indeed signal weakness. I'll be there, he confirmed, but I'll need to leave by noon. Family emergency. A pause. Family, sir. Yes, Maxwell replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Family. He ended the call and sat heavily in his leather chair. The word felt foreign on his tongue. Family. For 10 years, that concept had existed only in memory and regret. Now, unexpectedly, it had acquired a new dimension, one with brown eyes, a stuffed penguin, and wounds both visible and hidden. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times. Maxwell hadn't slept, but fatigue couldn't penetrate the crystalline clarity of his purpose. In the morning, he would face his board of directors, secure the Japanese deal, and begin systematically dismantling whatever scheme Vanessa Mitchell had constructed. For now, though, he would allow himself one moment of uncertainty. Was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? Could a man who had deliberately isolated himself for a decade suddenly become responsible for a traumatized child? Maxwell rose and moved silently through the house, pausing outside Emma's room. The door remained ajar as promised. Inside, her breathing had steadied into the deep rhythm of true sleep. Penji rested in the crook of her arm, guardian of whatever dreams now filled her mind. I will keep you safe, Maxwell whispered, the promise settling around his shoulders like a familiar weight. Not obligation, but purpose. As he turned away, his phone vibrated with an incoming text from Benjamin Hayes. Meeting arranged with family court judge. Trust fund investigation initiated. Watch the housekeeper, Wilson's not yours. She knows more than she's saying. Maxwell replied with a simple acknowledgement, then silently made his way back to his study. Sleep would not come tonight. Too many pieces needed arranging, too many threats required assessment. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky washed clean of clouds. Stars glittered above the Atlantic, cold and distant. Maxwell Grant stood at his window, a solitary figure in an empty house suddenly tasked with protecting a child he barely knew against enemies only beginning to reveal themselves. The chessboard was set, the first moves made, and somewhere across the night, Vanessa Mitchell was undoubtedly planning her counterstrike. Dawn broke over the Hamptons, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Emma woke disoriented, momentarily terrified by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned, the rain, her father's rejection, Maxwell Grant's unexpected appearance. She sat up, Penji clutched to her chest. The room seemed less intimidating in daylight, though no less grand. Through partially open curtains, she glimpsed manicured gardens leading to what appeared to be cliffs overlooking the ocean. A gentle knock preceded Mrs. Reynolds' entrance. The housekeeper carried a breakfast tray and a small stack of clothing. "Good morning, Miss Emma," she greeted warmly. "I trust you managed some rest despite everything." Emma nodded politely. "Yes, thank you. Is Mr. Grant awake?" "Mr. Grant has already left for his office in Manhattan. He asked me to tell you he'll return by early afternoon." Mrs. Reynolds set the tray on a small table near the window. "In the meantime, I've brought some clothes that might fit. They belong to Mr. Grant's daughter, Sophia." Emma accepted the folded garments, jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, all of excellent quality, though slightly dated in style. "Won't she mind me wearing her things?" A shadow crossed Mrs. Reynolds' face. "Sophia passed away, dear, 10 years ago now." "Oh." Emma touched the clothes with newfound reverence. "I'm sorry." "No need to be sorry. I think she would have liked you." Mrs. Reynolds opened the curtains, fully revealing the spectacular ocean view. "Mr. Grant has arranged for a tutor to visit this afternoon. He thought you might prefer to continue your studies here rather than return to school immediately." Emma picked at her breakfast, fresh fruit yogurt and warm croissants. "Did he say when I have to go back to my dad?" Mrs. Reynolds' expression softened. "That's not for me to say, dear. But Mr. Grant is not a man who makes promises lightly. If he said you're safe here, then you are." After breakfast, Emma explored her new surroundings under Mrs. Reynolds' watchful eye. Grant Manor was even more impressive by daylight, a perfect blend of luxury and taste, though strangely impersonal. No family photos adorned the walls, no evidence of hobbies or personal interests. It resembled an architectural showcase more than a home. In a small study adjacent to the main library, Emma discovered a chessboard pieces arranged mid-game. She touched a white knight carefully. "Mr. Grant plays against himself," Mrs. Reynolds explained. "He says it helps him anticipate his opponent's strategies." "My mom taught me chess," Emma said quietly. "She said it's not about capturing pieces, but about protecting your king." Mrs. Reynolds smiled. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She was. Emma replaced the knight exactly as she'd found it. She got sick really fast. Dad said it was cancer, but it didn't look like the cancer on TV. She just got more and more tired, and then one day she couldn't wake up. The housekeeper's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Mr. Grant was very fond of your mother. Her death affected him deeply." Emma wandered to the window, looking out at the restless Atlantic. "Victoria said Mom was just his employee, that he only helped her because she knew things about his company." "Victoria says many things, I imagine." Mrs. Reynolds' tone carried a hint of steel. "Not all of them true." Emma turned suddenly intent. "You don't like her." "It's not my place to like or dislike your father's companions," came the diplomatic response. "But you don't," Emma persisted. "Neither do I. She pretends to be nice when Dad's watching, but when he's not—" She trailed off unconsciously, rubbing her wrist where bruises from Victoria's grip were beginning to form. Mrs. Reynolds noticed the gesture. "Did she hurt you often?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "She said if I told Dad, he wouldn't believe me anyway. And she was right." "Mr. Grant will believe you," Mrs. Reynolds assured her. You should tell him everything when he returns. The morning passed quietly. Emma explored the library, finding comfort among the thousands of books lining the walls. She selected a worn copy of The Secret Garden and curled up in a window seat overlooking the ocean. Reading had always been her escape, a habit encouraged by Catherine and tolerated by Robert, at least before Victoria. Around noon, the house phone rang. Mrs. Reynolds answered, her expression growing concerned as she listened. "Yes, sir, I understand." "Of course, Don." She hung up and turned to Emma. "Mr. Grant will be delayed. An emergency board meeting has been called." "Is something wrong?" Emma asked, setting aside her book. Mrs. Reynolds hesitated. "Business matters. Nothing for you to worry about, dear." But Emma had grown adept at reading adults' expressions. "It's about me, isn't it? They don't want him to help me." The housekeeper considered her words carefully. "Mr. Grant's company requires his full attention. Some board members believe recent events might distract him." "I should go," Emma said quietly. "I don't want to cause problems." "Absolutely not," Mrs. Reynolds replied firmly. "Mr. Grant made his decision, and he is not a man easily swayed once his mind is set." She checked her watch. "Your tutor will arrive shortly. Perhaps you'd like to freshen up before the lesson." As Emma headed upstairs, the doorbell rang. Through the banister, she watched Mrs. Reynolds admit a severe-looking woman carrying a leather portfolio. They spoke quietly, glancing occasionally toward the stairs. Emma retreated to her room, suddenly anxious. She approached the large mirror above the dresser. The girl who stared back seemed different somehow. Smaller, more fragile, yet strangely determined. The butterfly bandages on her forehead stood out against her pale skin. She touched them gently, remembering the feeling of safety when Maxwell had cleaned the wound. "He'll come back," she told her reflection. He promised. In Manhattan, Maxwell Grant stood at the head of the conference table in Grant Empire's executive boardroom. 12 faces regarded him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. The Japanese delegation had departed satisfied, the deal secured through Maxwell's personal guarantee. Now came the internal reckoning. "This emergency session of the board will come to order," announced Victor Harrington, the 70-year-old chairman. "Mr. Grant, would you care to explain the rumors circulating about your sudden interest in playing guardian to Robert Wilson's daughter?" Maxwell surveyed the room with the cool assessment that had made him legendary in business circles. "Catherine Wilson was a valued employee and friend. Her daughter has been placed in my care due to concerns about her welfare. This is a personal matter, not a corporate one." "With respect," interjected Diane Forrester, head of legal compliance, "anything that affects your judgment affects this company. Taking in a child is not like adopting a pet, Maxwell. It requires time, attention, resources, all of which would be diverted from Grand Empire." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Maxwell remained impassive. "Ms. Forrester raises valid concerns," Victor continued. "The timing is particularly troubling, given the Japanese investment in our planned expansion into European markets." Maxwell placed his hands flat on the table. "I've never missed a meeting, delayed a decision, or failed to meet a commitment to this company in 15 years. My personal affairs have never interfered with business operations, and they won't start now." "This is different," argued Philip Monroe, the youngest board member at 40. "Children require constant attention. You've built your reputation on being available 24/7. "I built my reputation," Maxwell corrected coldly, "on making the right decisions under pressure, on seeing opportunities where others see only risk, on turning failure into success through sheer force of will." He straightened to his full height. "I did not call this meeting. I did not ask for your approval. I am informing you as a courtesy that my household has expanded to include Catherine Wilson's daughter. Any impact on operations will be managed appropriately." Victor leaned forward. "Maxwell, be reasonable. You have no experience with children. You live alone by choice. Your lifestyle cannot accommodate a 6-year-old girl." "My lifestyle," Maxwell replied evenly, "is mine to adjust as necessary." Diane Forrester sighed audibly. "This is exactly what we feared. Emotional decision-making. Maxwell, you're CEO of this company because you've always placed logic above sentiment. Now suddenly you're upending your life for a child you barely know." Maxwell's expression remained unchanged, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Are we voting on my competence as CEO, Ms. Forrester? Because If so, I'd be happy to review my record against any executive in this industry. A tense silence fell over the room. Maxwell had built Grant Empire from a struggling real estate firm into a global conglomerate. His leadership, while often ruthless, had created unprecedented wealth for everyone in the room. No one is questioning your leadership, Victor finally said. We're concerned about the child's impact on your availability during this critical expansion phase. Maxwell gathered his papers. Your concerns are noted. If there's nothing else, I have a meeting with Benjamin Hayes regarding Catherine Wilson's estate. The mention of Hayes, the legendary litigator whose return to practice would make headlines, caused another ripple of murmurs. Hayes, Victor frowned. Why involve him? Because, Maxwell replied, moving toward the door, this situation is more complex than it appears. Catherine's death may not have been from natural causes. Her estate has been mismanaged, and her daughter has been subjected to abuse. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Grand Empire has always stood for integrity above all else. I would be betraying our core values if I ignored what's happening. Before anyone could respond, Maxwell's phone rang. He checked the caller ID, then answered immediately. Grant. The blood drained from his face as he listened. Without another word to the board, he strode from the room, barking orders into the phone. Lock down the estate. No one enters or leaves. Alert local police. I'm on my way. Behind him, the boardroom erupted in confusion. Maxwell didn't care. His helicopter was already waiting on the rooftop, helipad pilot standing by. For the first time in 10 years, Grand Empire would have to manage without him. Emma was in danger, and nothing else mattered. The helicopter cut through turbulent air currents, banking sharply as Maxwell Grant leaned forward, knuckles white against his armrest. His normally impassive face betrayed the first real emotion his pilot had seen in years, raw, undiluted fear. Faster, he ordered, voice tight, whatever it takes. 20 minutes earlier, security alarms at Grant Manor had triggered a silent alert. The surveillance system showed 3 armed intruders attempting to breach the east wing where Emma's room was located. Reynolds had managed a frantic call before communications were cut. Now Maxwell's security team was engaged in a standoff with the intruders while local police were en route. As the helicopter approached the estate, Maxwell could see flashing lights below. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from Jensen, his head of security. Talk to me, Maxwell demanded, foregoing any greeting. Situation contained, sir, Jensen reported. 3 suspects in custody. Mrs. Reynolds and the child are secure in the panic room. No injuries. Maxwell exhaled slowly. Who sent them? They're not talking yet, but they came prepared, detailed floor plans, security override codes. This wasn't random. I'll be on the ground in 2 minutes. Keep them separated. And Jensen, no one speaks to them before I do. The helicopter touched down on the Manor's private landing pad. Maxwell was out before the rotors stopped spinning, striding toward the house with single-minded purpose. Detective Howard from Southampton Police approached, badge extended. Mr. Grant, we need to ask you some questions about... Later, Maxwell cut him off without breaking stride. My priority is the child. Inside, the normally pristine foyer showed signs of disruption, security personnel stationed at each entrance, police officers collecting evidence, a broken vase near the staircase. Maxwell headed directly for his office where the hidden entrance to the panic room was located. He entered a 12-digit code into a concealed keypad behind a painting of the New York skyline. A section of bookshelf swung outward, revealing a steel door. Maxwell placed his palm on the scanner, then leaned in for retinal verification. The door unsealed with a soft hiss. Inside, Mrs. Reynolds sat with Emma on a small sofa, reading aloud from The Secret Garden. Both looked up as Maxwell entered. Emma immediately dropped the book and ran to him, stopping just short of physical contact, uncertainty in her eyes. Maxwell surprised himself by kneeling down to her level. Are you all right? Emma nodded, clutching Penji tightly. Mrs. Reynolds said it was like a secret mission. We had to hide while the bad guys were caught. You were very brave, Maxwell said, his tone gentle in a way his board members would never have recognized. Both of you. Mrs. Reynolds approached her usual composure, slightly frayed. They came during the tutor's lesson. I didn't trust her timing, arriving just when you were called away. When the security alert sounded, I brought Emma here immediately. You did exactly right, Maxwell assured her, rising to his full height. Is the tutor still here? Police are questioning her now. She claims no knowledge of the intruders, but you don't believe her, Maxwell finished. Neither do I. Have Jensen bring me everything on her background check. Emma tugged lightly at Maxwell's sleeve. Were they coming for me? Maxwell considered lying to protect her, but remembered how perceptive she was. Yes, he admitted, but they failed and they'll remain in custody. Because of Victoria? Emma asked, her voice small but steady. Maxwell glanced at Mrs. Reynolds, who nodded almost imperceptibly. You've noticed things about Victoria, he stated rather than asked. Emma's grip on Penji tightened. She's not who she pretends to be. I heard her on the phone once talking about Mom's money. She said she'd been planning this for years. Maxwell guided Emma back to the sofa sitting beside her. Emma, I need you to tell me everything you remember about Victoria, things she said, people she met, anything unusual. Emma considered this carefully. She has a special phone she keeps hidden. She only uses it when Dad's not around. And she goes to the safe a lot, the one behind Mom's painting. She hesitated. Once I followed her. She was looking at papers with Mom's signature, but Mom was already gone. Maxwell exchanged a significant glance with Mrs. Reynolds. Forgery of Catherine's signature would explain the irregularities in the estate documents. Is there anything else? He prompted gently. Anything about your mother's illness, perhaps? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mom got sick after Victoria started bringing her special tea. She said it would help Mom sleep, but after drinking it, Mom always felt worse. A single tear escaped. I tried to tell Dad, but he said I was making things up. Maxwell fought to maintain his composure. If Emma's observations were accurate, Victoria Vanessa might have slowly poisoned Catherine with thallium or arsenic, both of which could mimic cancer symptoms. The confirmation would be in the sealed toxicology report Benjamin was trying to obtain. You've been very helpful, Maxwell told her. More than you know. A soft knock at the panic room door preceded Jensen's voice through the intercom. Sir Detective Howard is insisting on speaking with you. And we've identified one of the intruder's former military ties to organized crime in Boston. I'll be right out, Maxwell responded. He turned to Emma. I need to speak with the police now. Mrs. Reynolds will stay with you. Emma's eyes widened with sudden fear. You'll come back, right? The question, so simple yet laden with the weight of abandonment, struck Maxwell with unexpected force. This child, who had already lost her mother and been rejected by her father, feared losing the only security she'd found. I will always come back. Maxwell promised, the words emerging with absolute certainty. You have my word. Relief washed over Emma's face. She nodded, accepting his promise as irrefutable fact. Maxwell rose, straightening his tie, a habitual gesture before confrontations. Mrs. Reynolds, please remain here until I send Jensen personally to escort you both to the secure wing. Outside the panic room, Maxwell found Detective Howard waiting with thinly veiled impatience. The detective was in his 50s, with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much of human nature's darker aspects. Mr. Grant, I need to understand what's happening here. Howard began without preamble. Armed men attempting to breach your home isn't typical for Southampton, even for someone of your prominence. Maxwell gestured toward his office. Once inside, he closed the door and activated a signal, jammer standard procedure for sensitive business discussions. The child in my care, Emma Wilson, is the daughter of a former employee who died under suspicious circumstances, Maxwell explained clinically. Her father recently abandoned her, leaving her in my custody. I believe these events are connected to attempts to control her inheritance. Howard's eyebrows rose. Inheritance, how substantial are we talking? Approximately $50 million plus a 30% stake in Grant Empire that her mother held anonymously. The detective whistled softly. That would certainly motivate criminal activity, but why target the child rather than simply contest the will legally? Because, Maxwell replied, Emma may have witnessed activities that would implicate those responsible for her mother's death. Howard's expression hardened. Are you suggesting murder, Mr. Grant? I'm stating it as fact. Catherine Wilson was poisoned, likely over several months, by someone close to her. The toxicology report confirming this has been sealed, but my attorneys are working to access it. These are serious accusations. Howard leaned forward. Do you have evidence? I'm gathering it. In the meantime, I expect your department to provide adequate protection for Emma while these individuals remain at large. Howard frowned. We don't typically provide private security, Mr. Grant, even for the well-connected. Maxwell's gaze cooled by several degrees. Detective, shall we discuss the annual contribution Grant Foundation makes to your department's family support fund? Or perhaps the scholarship program that sent your daughter to Princeton last fall? Howard's face flushed. That sounds dangerously close to a bribe, Mr. Grant. Not at all, Maxwell countered smoothly. Simply a reminder that cooperation benefits everyone. I'm not asking for special treatment, merely for your department to fulfill its duty to protect a child in imminent danger. Before Howard could respond, Maxwell's phone vibrated. The screen showed a text from Benjamin Hayes. Got the report. Thallium poisoning confirmed. Judge signing emergency protective order now. Call immediately. Maxwell's suspicions were confirmed. Catherine had indeed been murdered, gradually poisoned until her body gave out. The rage that swept through him was glacial and absolute, a cold fury that had destroyed business opponents who crossed ethical lines. But this was different. This was personal. Detective Maxwell said, his voice deceptively calm. I've just received confirmation of thallium poisoning in Catherine Wilson's toxicology report. I expect your department will now treat this as a homicide investigation. Howard's demeanor shifted immediately. I'll need to see that report, Mr. Grant. My attorney will provide copies to your department. In the meantime, I suggest you question your suspects about their connection to Victoria Fraser, who is actually Vanessa Mitchell, a woman with a vengeance motive and access to the victim. The detective pulled out his notebook. Mitchell, why does that name sound familiar? Edward Mitchell was her brother. He died in prison 3 years ago after causing a fatal accident that killed my wife and daughter. Maxwell's voice remained steady, though something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. A coincidence, Detective Howard? Howard's expression sobered. I'll assign officers to remain on property and coordinate with your security team. After the detective left, Maxwell stood at his office window, looking out over the manicured grounds, now swarming with police and security personnel. The peaceful sanctuary of Grant Manor had been violated, and Emma, already traumatized, had been forced to hide in a panic room on her second day under his protection. His phone rang. Victor Harrington, the board chairman. Maxwell, Victor began without greeting. The board has called an emergency vote of confidence. Your abrupt departure from today's meeting has raised serious concerns about your commitment to the company. Maxwell watched as police led the 3 handcuffed intruders to waiting patrol cars. Someone just attempted to abduct or harm Catherine Wilson's daughter from my home, Victor. If the board believes that doesn't warrant my immediate attention, perhaps they should reconsider their priorities. This is exactly what we feared, Victor continued undeterred. Personal matters interfering with your leadership responsibilities. The Japanese are already expressing concerns about stability. The Japanese signed in this morning, Maxwell replied coldly, $2 billion in immediate investment with contractual obligations for an additional 10 over 5 years. I secured that deal before attending to a literal life-or-death situation involving a child. Nevertheless, the vote is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare a statement explaining how you intend to balance these new responsibilities with your duties as CEO. Maxwell ended the call without responding. The implied ultimatum was clear. Choose between Emma and Grant Empire. For the first time in his career, Maxwell wasn't certain which he would prioritize, a realization that both surprised and unsettled him. Jensen appeared at the door. Sir, the tutor has been cleared. She was thoroughly vetted and has no connection to the intruders. It appears they were monitoring the house and waited for your departure before attempting entry. Increase security parameters to 1 mile in all directions, Maxwell ordered. No one approaches without complete background verification. And prepare the secure wing. Emma and Mrs. Reynolds will be staying there until further notice. Already done, sir. Jensen hesitated, then added, the board meeting tomorrow, would you like me to arrange additional security? Maxwell considered this. Yes, and have the helicopter on standby. I don't intend to be away from the estate for long. After Jensen departed, Maxwell retrieved Emma and Mrs. Reynolds from the panic room. As they walked through the house toward the secure wing, Emma remained unusually quiet, observing the increased security presence with solemn understanding beyond her years. The secure wing occupied the western portion of the manor with reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, and its own independent security system. Originally designed after the kidnapping of a prominent CEO's child in the early 2000s, it had never been used during Maxwell's residence. These will be your quarters until the situation stabilizes, he explained as they entered a tastefully appointed living area. It's completely secure with its own kitchen entertainment facilities and direct access to the gardens through monitored pathways. Emma surveyed the space, then looked up at Maxwell. It's like a fortress. Precisely. He nodded, appreciating her perception. Nothing will harm you here. Mrs. Reynolds excused herself to prepare dinner, leaving Maxwell and Emma alone in the living area. An awkward silence fell between them. Maxwell unaccustomed to casual conversation, Emma still processing the day's events. Finally, she approached a chess set on a side table. Do you play Rehanum? Yes, Maxwell replied, welcoming the neutral topic. Do you Bahim? Ma nodded. Mom taught me. I'm not very good yet. Neither was I at first. Maxwell moved to the table, gesturing toward a chair. Would you like to play? They set up the pieces, Emma handling each one with care. Maxwell observed her methodical approach, arranging her pawns, precisely ensuring each piece was centered on its square. When the board was ready, she looked up expectantly. White moves first, Maxwell prompted gently. Emma advanced her king's pawn 2 squares, a traditional opening. Maxwell responded with the same move, creating a symmetrical position. As the game progressed, he deliberately played below his capability, allowing Emma opportunities to develop her pieces and strategy. Check, she declared after 15 minutes, her knight threatening Maxwell's king. Maxwell nodded approvingly. Well played, but remember, creating a threat also creates vulnerability. He moved his bishop, simultaneously blocking the check and threatening her knight. Emma studied the board intently. Mom always said chess is like life. Every move has consequences. Your mother was wise, Maxwell agreed. Chess teaches us to think several moves ahead, to understand that actions have repercussions beyond the immediate moment. As Emma considered her next move, Maxwell noticed her rubbing her wrist unconsciously. The sleeve of her sweater had ridden up, revealing the edge of a purple bruise. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice casual. Did Victoria do that? Emma glanced at her wrist, then quickly pulled the sleeve down. She got mad when I asked about Mom's papers. She said I was too nosy for my own good. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said I'd end up like Mom if I didn't learn to keep quiet. A cold fury settled in Maxwell's chest. May I see, Hesitantly, Emma extended her arm. Maxwell gently pushed back the sleeve, revealing a clear handprint bruise encircling her small wrist. The contrast between the violent marking and her delicate skin ignited something primal in him, a protective instinct he'd thought long dead. Did your father know about this? Emma shook her head. He didn't believe me when I tried to tell him. Victoria said I did it to myself for attention. Maxwell carefully rolled her sleeve back down. I believe you, Emma, and I promise you Victoria will never harm you again. Emma searched his face for signs of insincerity, finding none. You're different from other grown-ups. You don't pretend things are okay when they're not. Pretense solves nothing, Maxwell stated simply. Reality, however difficult, must be confronted directly. Is that why you're so good at business? Because you see things as they really are. Maxwell considered this childlike assessment of his business acumen. Partially, success requires clarity, seeing situations without emotional distortion, but it also requires vision, imagining possibilities beyond current limitations. Their chess game resumed, but Maxwell's mind worked on multiple levels, analyzing not only the board before him, but the complex human chess match unfolding around Emma. Vanessa Mitchell had positioned her pieces carefully over years, manipulating Robert, poisoning Catherine, tempting to control Emma. Her objective seemed clear: destroy Maxwell Grant by targeting those connected to him. But why wait so long? Why the elaborate scheme rather than direct confrontation? The answer likely lay in the 30% of Grant Empire that Catherine had secretly owned shares, now part of Emma's inheritance. With those shares, Vanessa could potentially destabilize the company Maxwell had built. Checkmate, Emma announced suddenly, her rook and queen forming an inescapable trap for Maxwell's king. Maxwell blinked, genuinely surprised. He had underestimated her, while his mind wandered, a rookie mistake he hadn't made in years. Well played, Emma. You defeated me fair and square. A smile brightened her face, the first real smile he'd seen since her arrival. Mom would be proud. She could never beat you. Your mother and I played occasionally during lunch breaks, Maxwell confirmed, remembering those rare moments of casual interaction. She was quite good, though she claimed to play only recreationally. She had a special notebook where she wrote down all her chess games, Emma said, with little notes about what worked and what didn't. She said studying patterns helps you improve. Maxwell's interest sharpened. Do you know where this notebook is now? Emma's expression fell. In Dad's house, in Mom's bedroom. Victoria moved into that room after Mom died, but Dad kept Mom's books in a box under the bed. Would this notebook contain games she played with me? Maxwell asked, an idea forming. I think so. She wrote down all her games. Why? Maxwell reset the chess pieces methodically. Your mother was very thorough in her documentation. If she kept notes about chess game, she might have kept notes about other things as well. Emma's eyes widened with understanding. About Victoria. Possibly. Maxwell nodded. Catherine was observant and cautious. If she suspected someone was harming her, she might have recorded evidence. The implications hung in the air between them. If Catherine had documented Vanessa's actions or suspicious symptoms, it would provide crucial evidence beyond the toxicology report. Mrs. Reynolds appeared at the doorway. Dinner is ready. I've prepared it in the secure kitchen as requested. During the meal, simple but expertly prepared roast chicken with vegetables, Maxwell noticed Emma eating with more appetite than the previous day. The chess victory seemed to have boosted her confidence, providing a small sense of normalcy amid the chaos. As they finished dessert, Maxwell's phone rang. The caller ID showed Diana Reynolds, the private investigator he'd hired that morning. He excused himself to take the call in the adjoining room. Mr. Grant, Diana began without preamble, I've been monitoring Victoria Fraser's movements as requested. She's currently meeting with a man identified as Daniel Carter at the Pierre in Manhattan. Carter is a lawyer with known connections to organized crime figures in Boston. The same Boston connection as our intruders, Maxwell noted. Are they discussing Emma? Yes, but there's more. They're planning to file for emergency custody tomorrow, claiming you've kidnapped the child. They have a judge lined up, Harmon, in family court. He's known for being easily influenced by certain political donors. Maxwell processed this information rapidly. What evidence are they presenting? Doctored photographs suggesting abuse statements first from concerned neighbors who don't actually exist, and medical records claiming the child has psychological issues requiring specialized care. All fabricated, I assume? Completely, Diana confirmed. They're also discussing a contingency plan if the legal approach fails. I couldn't hear specifics, but Carter mentioned permanent solutions that made even Victoria uncomfortable. Maxwell's blood ran cold. Permanent solutions could only mean one thing: Emma's elimination if she couldn't be controlled. Continue surveillance, he instructed. Record everything. I want evidence of conspiracy admissible in court. After ending the call, Maxwell returned to find Emma helping Mrs. Reynolds clear the table, a child instinctively seeking normalcy through routine tasks. The simple domesticity of the scene struck Maxwell forcefully. This was what his home had lacked for a decade: life, humanity, purpose beyond success. Tomorrow will be challenging, Maxwell announced, addressing both Emma and Mrs. Reynolds. Victoria is attempting to regain custody through legal channels. We need to prepare. Mrs. Reynolds nodded gravely while Emma's face drained of color. Will I have to see her? The child asked, voice trembling. No, Maxwell assured her. Benjamin Hayes will represent our interests in court. You'll remain here with Mrs. Reynolds in full security. But don't judges want to talk to kids in custody cases? Emma persisted. That's what happened when my friend Zoe's parents got divorced. Maxwell knelt to her level, a gesture becoming surprisingly natural. Typically, yes, but given the circumstances, Judge Marshall has agreed to defer your testimony until you've had time with a court-appointed child psychologist. Relief washed over Emma's features. So I don't have to go back to Dad and Victoria tomorrow. Not tomorrow, not ever, unless you specifically wish to see your father and only under supervised conditions. Maxwell held her gaze steadily. I made you a promise, Emma. I intend to keep it. After Emma had been tucked into bed by Mrs. Reynolds, Maxwell retreated to the secure wing study. Benjamin Hayes had sent over the legal documents for tomorrow's hearing, hundreds of pages requiring review before morning. He worked methodically until nearly midnight when a soft knock interrupted his concentration. Expecting Mrs. Reynolds, he was surprised to find Emma standing in the doorway, Penji clutched tightly against her nightgown. I had a bad dream, she explained simply. Maxwell set aside the legal brief. Would you like to talk about it? Emma shook her head. Just wanted to make sure you were still here. The simple statement pierced through Maxwell's carefully constructed emotional barriers. This child abandoned by one father figure needed reassurance that her new protector wouldn't similarly vanish. I'm here, he confirmed. Would you like to sit for a while? Emma nodded, climbing into a leather armchair opposite his desk. She tucked her feet beneath her settling Penji in her lap. What are you working on? Legal preparations for tomorrow's hearing, Maxwell explained, keeping his tone conversational. Benjamin Hayes has filed counter-motions to Victoria's custody petition. Is Mr. Hayes nice? Maxwell almost smiled at the childlike assessment criterion. Nice was not a word typically associated with Benjamin Hayes, whose courtroom reputation had once prompted the opposing counsel to faint during cross-examination. He's extremely effective, Maxwell replied diplomatically, and he believes in justice, which is more important than being nice. Emma considered this. Mom used to say people who are nice to your face but do bad things behind your back are worse than people who seem tough but do the right thing. Your mother had excellent judgment, Maxwell agreed. She recognized authentic character beneath the surface behavior. Is that why she trusted you? Because you're real, even if you're not always nice? The question posed with childlike directness caught Maxwell off guard. I believe so, he answered after a thoughtful pause. Your mother and I had a professional relationship based on mutual respect. We recognized certain similarities in our approaches to life. Emma yawned, the late hour catching up with her. Mom said you were the loneliest person she ever met, but also the strongest. Maxwell stilled Catherine's assessment, striking uncomfortably close to truth. Your mother was unusually perceptive. She said you needed someone to care about besides yourself. Emma's eyelids began to droop. Maybe she meant Mia. As the child drifted toward sleep in the armchair, Maxwell found himself at a loss. The proper procedure would be to wake her and return her to her bedroom. Yet something prevented him from disturbing this moment of peaceful vulnerability. Instead, he rose quietly, retrieved a cashmere throw from the adjacent sofa, and carefully draped it over her small form. Emma didn't wake but shifted slightly, hugging Penji closer. Maxwell returned to his desk, continuing his review of the legal documents with renewed focus. Occasionally, he glanced at the sleeping child, her presence simultaneously foreign and somehow right in his traditionally solitary space. Tomorrow would bring confrontation on multiple fronts: the board's vote of confidence, Victoria's custody petition, the ongoing criminal investigation into Catherine's death, and the persistent threat to Emma's safety. Maxwell Grant, accustomed to managing complex business crises, now faced challenges that transcended spreadsheets and profit margins. For the first time in a decade, the outcome mattered beyond professional success. A child's well-being, her very life depended on his decisions and capabilities. The responsibility should have felt burdensome. Instead, it provided a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced since losing his own family. Maxwell's phone vibrated with an incoming text from Diana Reynolds. V and Carter separated. V returning to Wilson residence. Carter meeting with unidentified male at hotel bar. Continuing surveillance. Another text followed this one from Benjamin Hayes. Judge Marshall reviewing emergency protective order. Wilson's lawyer attempting to block. Court opens 8 a.m. Be ready for anything. Maxwell glanced at Emma, peaceful in sleep despite the storm gathering around her. Catherine's daughter. A child who had already suffered profound loss and betrayal, yet maintained an essential innocence and resilience. I will not fail her, Maxwell whispered to the quiet room. Not a promise, a statement of immutable fact. Outside, beyond the secure wing's reinforced walls and vigilant security personnel, the Atlantic crashed against the cliffs in relentless rhythm. Somewhere in Southampton, Victoria Fraser, Vanessa Mitchell, plotted her next move. In Manhattan, Grand Empire's board prepared to challenge their CEO's priorities. And in Boston, unknown forces mobilized additional resources against a child whose only crime was inheriting her mother's shares and potentially her knowledge. The chess pieces were in motion. Tomorrow would bring the next critical exchange. Maxwell returned his attention to the legal documents, reading each page with meticulous care, preparing for every contingency. Across the room, Emma slept on, unaware of the forces aligning against her, and equally unaware of the formidable protection now committed to her safety. For the first time since the tragic accident that claimed his family, Maxwell Grant had found something someone worth fighting for beyond wealth and power. The revelation was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. In her sleep, Emma murmured something unintelligible, her small fingers tightening around Penji's worn fabric. Maxwell paused in his reading, watching as she settled back into peaceful slumber. "Everything will be all right," he said softly, knowing she couldn't hear him. "I promise." It was a vow he intended to keep, regardless of the cost. Dawn broke over Grant Manor with ominous gray clouds gathering on the horizon. Maxwell Grant stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his bedroom suite, already dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that served as both armor and statement. Today would determine not only Emma's future but his own. His phone vibrated with an incoming call from Jensen, head of security. "Sir, we've completed the morning perimeter sweep. All clear. The helicopter is ready for your departure to Manhattan at 0700. "And Emma's security detail?" Maxwell asked, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, a rare personal indulgence from his more optimistic years. 4 men positioned throughout the secure wing rotation protocols in place. Mrs. Reynolds has been briefed on emergency procedures. No one enters or leaves without biometric confirmation. "Good. Has Benjamin arrived?" "Yes, sir. He's reviewing documents in the main library, and Detective Howard is here as well, requesting a brief meeting before you depart." Maxwell checked his watch, a rare Patek Philippe with the inscription, "Time is the only thing money cannot buy." The sentiment had become increasingly relevant these past few days. "Tell Benjamin I'll join him shortly. Have Detective Howard meet me in my study in 5 minutes." After ending the call, Maxwell moved silently to the door of the adjacent room where Emma had been relocated late last night. He opened it just enough to confirm she was still sleeping, peacefully, Penji tucked securely under one arm. The sight brought an unfamiliar sensation, a protective warmth that both unsettled and centered him. Downstairs, Detective Howard waited in Maxwell's study, looking uncomfortable among the rare first editions and ancient maps that decorated the walls. "Mr. Grant," Howard began without preamble, "we've identified the intruders from yesterday. All 3 have connections to Daniel Carter, Victoria Fraser's attorney. One of them previously worked as private security for the Mitchell family." "Mitchell," Maxwell repeated, confirming the connection to Victoria's true identity. Howard nodded. "We've obtained a warrant to search Mr. Wilson's residence based on Emma's testimony and the evidence of Catherine Wilson's poisoning. The judge signed it an hour ago." "Victoria will have been warned," Maxwell noted. "She'll have removed anything incriminating." "Perhaps," Howard conceded, "but people in panic make mistakes. We might get lucky." He hesitated. "There's something else. We've placed a protective detail on Robert Wilson." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "You believe he's in danger?" "If Victoria Fraser is actually Vanessa Mitchell, and she's been systematically working towards some vendetta against you, Wilson may have outlived his usefulness. He knows enough to implicate her in Catherine's death if he starts connecting the dots." Maxwell considered this. "Has he been informed of the true situation?" "Not yet. We're approaching with caution. His alcoholism makes him unpredictable, and if he warns her—" Howard trailed off. "Understood. Keep me informed of any developments." Maxwell stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I have a board vote and custody hearing to attend." In the main library, Benjamin Hayes sat surrounded by stacks of legal documents. At 62, Hayes remained imposing 6'4", with silver hair, cropped military short, and piercing blue eyes that had intimidated witnesses and opposing counsel for decades. "Maxwell," he acknowledged without looking up, "Judge Marshall will hear our emergency protective order at 8, followed immediately by Victoria's custody petition. I've prepared counter motions on 6 separate grounds." "Will they be sufficient?" Maxwell asked, accepting a coffee from Mrs. Reynolds, who had appeared silently at his side. Benjamin set down his pen. "Nothing in law is guaranteed, but we have the toxicology report confirming Catherine's poisoning evidence of Victoria's true identity, documented abuse of Emma, and the attempted abduction yesterday. The scales are tipped in our favor." "Victoria has a judge in her pocket," Maxwell reminded him. "Harmon. Which is why I filed in Marshall's court first," Benjamin replied with a hint of his legendary courtroom cunning. "Jurisdiction was established before Victoria could manipulate the assignment. Marshall is incorruptible." Maxwell nodded, a rare respect in his eyes. "And the board vote?" Different battlefield, same strategy. Your performance metrics over 15 years speak for themselves. The quarterly projections show record growth. The Japanese deal alone should silence most opposition. Benjamin leaned forward. But Maxwell, you need to decide how far you are willing to go for this child. The board will sense hesitation. There is no hesitation, Maxwell stated with unexpected conviction. Emma stays under my protection. If the board cannot accept that they can find another CEO. Benjamin's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest thing to surprise he ever displayed. I've known you 30 years, Maxwell. I've never heard you place anything above Grant Empire. Priorities evolve, Maxwell replied simply. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Reynolds. Sir Emma is awake and asking for you before you leave. Maxwell found Emma in the secure wing's kitchen, attempting to reach a cereal bowl from a high cabinet. He retrieved it for her without comment, then poured the cereal and milk as she settled at the counter. You're leaving, she observed, noting his formal attire. Yes, board meeting at 9, court hearing at 11. I should return by late afternoon. Maxwell poured himself a second cup of coffee, buying time to find the right words. Emma, today may be difficult. Victoria will say untrue things to try to regain custody of you. Emma spooned cereal methodically, her expression serious. She'll say I'm making up stories. That's what she always told Dad. She might claim I've influenced you or that I've taken you against your will. Maxwell watched her carefully. What matters is that you know the truth. No court decision can change that. Emma set down her spoon. Are you scared? The question, so direct, so perceptive, momentarily disarmed him. Maxwell Grant did not acknowledge fear, not to his board, his competitors, or himself. Yet this child had identified the emotion he had been suppressing since yesterday. Yes, he admitted the truth, surprisingly liberating. Not of Victoria or the board, but of failing you. Emma considered this with solemn understanding. Mom said everyone fails sometimes. What matters is that you try again. She reached across the counter and placed her small hand atop his. I believe in you, Mr. Grant. The simple gesture and childlike faith struck Maxwell with unexpected force. He cleared his throat. Thank you, Emma. That means a great deal. The moment was interrupted by Jensen's appearance at the doorway. Sir, the helicopter is ready. We need to depart now to make your first meeting. Maxwell nodded, rising from the counter. To his surprise, Emma slipped from her stool and approached him, arms outstretched. He froze momentarily, unaccustomed to such displays, then awkwardly returned the hug. Be careful, she whispered. Victoria is sneaky. I'm aware, he assured her, gently disengaging. Remember, Mrs. Reynolds and the security team will keep you safe. I'll call when the hearings are finished. As the helicopter lifted off, Maxwell watched Emma standing with Mrs. Reynolds on the terrace below, her small hand raised in farewell. The image stayed with him as Manhattan's skyline came into view 20 minutes later, a reminder of what now hung in the balance. Grand Empire headquarters occupied the upper floors of a sleek skyscraper in Midtown. The company logo, a stylized G, formed from intersecting architectural elements illuminated against the morning sky. As Maxwell entered the executive floor, his assistant, Catherine Muller, met him with the day's agenda and the latest intelligence. The board is already assembled, she reported, matching his brisk pace toward the conference room. Victor Harrington has been making calls all morning, securing votes against you. Current count is 6-5 in your favor, with Diane Forrester undecided. Forrester always plays both sides, Maxwell noted without breaking stride. She'll vote with the majority once it's clear. At the boardroom doors he paused. Catherine, clear my schedule after the vote. Benjamin Hayes will meet me here at 10 to prepare for the custody hearing. Already done, sir. Her expression softened slightly. And sir, good luck. Maxwell entered the boardroom to expectant silence. 12 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from supportive to openly hostile. Victor Harrington at the far end tapped his gavel to call the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we are convened for an extraordinary vote of confidence regarding Maxwell Grant's continued leadership as Chief Executive Officer. Recent events have raised concerns about Mr. Grant's focus and commitment to Grant Empire's primary mission. Maxwell remained standing, surveying the room with the calculated composure that had become his trademark. Before you vote, I'd like to address these concerns directly. Victor nodded reluctantly. Proceed, Mr. Grant. 15 years ago, I took control of a failing real estate firm with assets under 20 million and transformed it into a global conglomerate valued at $37 billion. Every person in this room has become wealthy beyond reasonable expectation through that transformation. Maxwell moved around the table slowly, making eye contact with each member. During those 15 years, I have never taken a vacation, never missed a quarterly target, never failed to identify and capitalize on market opportunities others deemed impossible. He stopped behind his chair at the head of the table. Now, for the first time, I have taken on a personal responsibility protection of a child whose mother saved this company during our most vulnerable period. The Japanese deal, Victor began, is secured, Maxwell cut in sharply. 2 billion immediate investment, 10 billion over 5 years. Signed and executed before I left yesterday's meeting. Nevertheless, Victor pressed, the appearance of stability is crucial. Taking in this child creates unnecessary complications and distractions. Maxwell's expression hardened. Let me be perfectly clear. Emma Wilson will remain under my protection. Her mother was murdered by someone attempting to access her inheritance, which includes 30% of this company's shares. A shocked murmur ran through the room. Most board members had been unaware of Catherine's significant ownership stake. 30%. Diane Forrester questioned, her calculating mind immediately grasping the implications. How is that possible without board knowledge? Catherine purchased the shares through a holding company during our expansion phase, Maxwell explained. She believed in Grand Empire when many of you were advocating conservative growth strategies. Those shares are now part of Emma's trust, which I control as her guardian. The strategic revelation shifted the room's dynamics instantly. What had appeared as Maxwell's personal crusade now directly impacted the company's ownership structure. So this is about maintaining control of those shares, Victor suggested with thinly veiled accusation. Maxwell's gaze turned glacial. This is about protecting a child from the people who murdered her mother. The shares are relevant only insofar as they represent motive for that murder. He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. Now you have a simple choice. Vote confidence in my leadership, understanding that Emma Wilson is now part of my household and my priority. Or vote no confidence, triggering my immediate resignation and the automatic transfer of my personal 40% stake in Grand Empire to a blind trust controlled by Benjamin Hayes. The room went deadly silent. Maxwell had just revealed his nuclear option, one that would potentially destabilize the company and crater its stock value overnight. You're bluffing, Victor challenged, though uncertainty crept into his voice. I have never bluffed in this boardroom, Maxwell replied evenly. The paperwork is already executed. One call from me activates it. Diane Forrester cleared her throat. Perhaps we've been hasty. Mr. Grant's personal arrangements need not interfere with his professional responsibilities. His track record speaks for itself. Others began nodding, the wind shifting perceptibly. Maxwell remained impassive, though inwardly he noted the predictable pivot towards self-interest. I move we take the vote, said Robert Chen, the technology division head, who had always supported Maxwell's leadership. Victor, recognizing defeat, called for a show of hands. Those in favor of expressing continued confidence in Maxwell Grant as Chief Executive Officer. 11 hands rose immediately. Only Victor's remained down a final symbolic resistance. Motion carries, he announced flatly. This meeting is adjourned. As the board members filed out, Maxwell received a text from Benjamin Hayes. Wilson residence search complete. Found notebook hidden in air vent. Catherine documented everything. Bringing to court. Meet me in lobby at 10:30. A second text followed this one from Diana Reynolds. Victoria left Wilson House 00800. Currently with Carter at courthouse. Robert Wilson hasn't been seen since last night. Continuing surveillance. Maxwell forwarded the information about Robert to Detective Howard, then headed to his office to prepare for the court hearing. The board battle had been won, but it was merely a prelude to the more critical confrontation ahead. At precisely 10:30, Maxwell met Benjamin in the lobby. The legendary attorney carried a weathered leather briefcase containing what might be their most powerful evidence, Catherine's own documentation of her systematic poisoning. How detailed is the notebook? Maxwell asked as they entered the waiting Bentley. Meticulous, Benjamin replied. Daily symptoms correlations with T. Victoria served suspicions about documents she was pressured to sign. Catherine was building a case, Maxwell. She knew exactly what was happening to her. Yet she didn't come to me directly. The realization pained him more than expected. She mentions that, Benjamin said quietly. Her last entry indicates she planned to bring everything to you the following week. She died 3 days after writing it. The Manhattan family court building loomed ahead, its brutalist architecture, a fitting backdrop for the emotional battles fought within. As they approached the entrance, media had already gathered. Someone had leaked information about the CEO of Grand Empire becoming embroiled in a custody dispute. Inside, they found Judge Elizabeth Marshall's courtroom on the third floor. At 65, Marshall had earned a reputation for rigorous adherence to evidence over emotion, with the child's welfare as her paramount concern. Victoria Fraser sat at the plaintiff's table presenting a picture of demure concern in a modest navy dress, her golden curls subdued into a respectful bun. Daniel Carter, her attorney, whispered something that made her nod solemnly. The performance was flawless, grieving friend, concerned about a child's welfare. Benjamin nudged Maxwell. Remember, she's playing a role. Don't let her provocation affect your composure. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Marshall entered. The proceedings began with Victoria's petition for emergency custody, claiming Maxwell had unlawfully removed Emma from her home environment. Carter approached the bench confidently. Your Honor, Mr. Grant forcibly removed Emma Wilson from her father's custody without legal standing. While Mr. Wilson has temporarily assigned guardianship to Ms. Fraser, his longtime companion, Mr. Grant has refused all contact, effectively kidnapping the child. Benjamin rose immediately. Your Honor, we have documented evidence that Emma Wilson was abandoned by her father at Miss Fraser's instigation. Mr. Grant, as named godfather in Catherine Wilson's will, acted to protect a child in immediate danger. Judge Marshall frowned. Where is Robert Wilson? As the child's father, his testimony seems relevant to these proceedings. We've been unable to locate Mr. Wilson since yesterday evening, Carter admitted reluctantly. However, before his temporary absence, he signed a notarized document transferring guardianship to Ms. Fraser. Benjamin approached the bench. Your Honor, we contest the validity of that document. We have evidence suggesting Robert Wilson's signature was obtained while he was severely intoxicated, possibly drugged, and that Victoria Fraser or Vanessa Mitchell, her true identity, has engaged in a pattern of document falsification. Victoria's composed facade cracked momentarily, her eyes widening at the use of her real name. She recovered quickly, leaning to whisper urgently to Carter. Judge Marshall raised an eyebrow. These are serious allegations, Mr. Hayes. I assume you have evidence. Substantial evidence, Your Honor, Benjamin confirmed, including a toxicology report confirming Catherine Wilson was murdered via thallium poisoning, Catherine's own documentation of her symptoms correlating with tea served by Ms. Fraser, and evidence connecting Ms. Fraser to an attempted abduction of Emma Wilson from Mr. Grant's residence yesterday. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Marshall studied Benjamin carefully, then turned to Carter. Counsel, were you aware of these allegations? Carter had paled visibly. Your Honor, this is the first I'm hearing of such outlandish claims. Ms. Fraser has been a devoted companion to Robert Wilson and a loving presence in Emma's life. Loving. Maxwell couldn't contain himself, rising to his feet. Emma bears bruises from this woman's loving attention. Mr. Grant, Judge Marshall warned, please allow your counsel to speak for you. Benjamin placed a restraining hand on Maxwell's arm. Your Honor, we have photographs documenting physical abuse testimony from the Wilson household staff regarding Ms. Fraser's treatment of Emma, and most critically, Catherine Wilson's own journal detailing her suspicions of poisoning. Judge Marshall considered this information gravely. Mr. Hayes, please approach with this evidence. Mr. Carter, you as well. As the attorneys presented their evidence at the bench, Maxwell studied Victoria. Her performance as the concerned caregiver had all but disappeared, replaced by barely concealed calculation. She caught his gaze and held it, a small, venomous smile playing at the corners of her mouth. In that moment, Maxwell recognized the depth of her hatred, a festering wound from her brother's death metastasized into obsessive vengeance. Edward Mitchell had died in prison after causing the accident that killed Elizabeth and Sophia. Victoria Vanessa had spent a decade planning retribution, targeting not just Maxwell, but anyone connected to him. The whispered conference at the bench concluded. Judge Marshall addressed the courtroom with grave authority. Having reviewed the preliminary evidence, I am issuing an emergency protective order placing Emma Wilson in the temporary custody of Maxwell Grant. Ms. Fraser is prohibited from any contact with the child pending full investigation of these serious allegations. Victoria rose, abandoning pretense. This is outrageous. He manipulated evidence. Emma belongs with her father. Ms. Fraser, Judge Marshall cautioned, control yourself or I will have you removed. Carter tugged Victoria's sleeve, urging her to sit. She complied, reluctantly, fury evident in every line of her body. Additionally, Judge Marshall continued, I am ordering psychiatric evaluation of Emma Wilson by court-appointed specialists before any further custody proceedings. Detective Howard is directed to coordinate with the district attorney regarding potential criminal charges related to Catherine Wilson's death and yesterday's attempted abduction. Benjamin leaned toward Maxwell. Better than we could have hoped. This gives us time to build an ironclad case. As the judge finalized the orders, Maxwell's phone vibrated with an urgent text from Jensen. Emergency, estate security breached. Multiple intruders. Mrs. Reynolds and Emma relocated to panic room. Police en route. Call immediately. Cold fear seized Maxwell's chest. He showed the message to Benjamin, who immediately rose. Your Honor, we've just received word that armed intruders have breached Mr. Grant's estate, where Emma is currently located. We request immediate adjournment. Judge Marshall nodded gravely. Court is adjourned. Mr. Grant, please keep the court informed of the child's status. As they hurried from the courtroom, Maxwell noticed Victoria's triumphant smile. She had anticipated this move, perhaps even orchestrated it. She planned this, Maxwell muttered. Dialing Jensen's number. Timed the attack to coincide with our court appearance. The call connected. Jensen status report. 4 armed intruders penetrated the northeast perimeter. Jensen reported the sound of gunfire in the background. Security team engaged. Mrs. Reynolds and Emma are secure in the panic room, but intruders are attempting to breach the secure wing. Helicopter is standing by, Benjamin informed Maxwell as they rushed toward the exit. We're 15 minutes out, Maxwell told Jensen. Hold them until we arrive. As they emerged onto the courthouse steps, a commotion erupted nearby. Robert Wilson staggered toward them, disheveled and desperate. Grant, he shouted. Where's my daughter? What have you done with her? Maxwell assessed Robert quickly. He was drunk, agitated, and potentially volatile. Emma is at my estate, which is currently under attack by people connected to Victoria. Robert blinked in confusion. Attack? What are you talking about? Your girlfriend is not who you think she is, Maxwell stated bluntly. Her real name is Vanessa Mitchell. She poisoned Catherine and has been manipulating you to gain control of Emma's inheritance. That's absurd, Robert protested, though doubt clouded his eyes. Victoria loves me. She's helping me get my life back together. Is that why she encouraged you to throw your daughter out into a storm? Maxwell countered, conscious of precious seconds ticking away. Is that why she served Catherine special tea that contained thallium? Robert's face paled. Thallium Catherine was poisoned. Yes, and now Victoria's associates are attacking my estate to abduct Emma. I need to go. Maxwell turned toward the waiting car. Wait. Robert grabbed his arm. Take me with you. She's my daughter. Maxwell hesitated, weighing the request against the crisis unfolding. Robert was unstable, potentially a liability. Yet the desperation in his eyes seemed genuine, perhaps the first authentic emotion he'd displayed in months. If you come, you follow my orders precisely, Maxwell stipulated. Emma's safety is the only priority. Robert nodded frantically. Anything. Please, I need to help her. The helicopter ride to Southampton felt interminable, though objectively it took only 18 minutes. Maxwell maintained constant communication with Jensen, receiving updates on the deteriorating situation. The intruders had breached the secure wing and were attempting to access the panic room using specialized equipment. They're professionals, Jensen reported grimly. Military or ex-intelligence. Standard security protocols aren't deterring them. Activate Protocol Omega, Maxwell instructed. Authorization code Sierra Echo Victor Echo November. Sir, that will flood the entire secure wing with CS gas. Mrs. Reynolds and Emma. The panic room has independent air supply, Maxwell cut in. Execute immediately. Robert, listening to this exchange, stared at Maxwell with newfound respect and fear. You prepared for something like this. I prepare for everything, Maxwell replied simply. After losing my family, I learned that conventional security measures are insufficient against determined adversaries. As the helicopter approached Grant Manor, they could see police vehicles surrounding the property and smoke rising from the secure wing. Jensen's voice came through again. Protocol Omega deployed. 2 intruders down from gas exposure. 2 others retreated but remain on property. Police have established perimeter but are awaiting tactical team before entry. Land at the secondary helipad, Maxwell instructed the pilot. We'll access through the tunnel system. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. Tunnel system. The property was originally built during Prohibition, Maxwell explained as the helicopter descended. The tunnels were used for smuggling operations. I reinforced them as emergency escape routes. They landed in a clearing half a mile from the main estate. Maxwell led them to what appeared to be a maintenance shed, which concealed a reinforced door with biometric security. Once inside, stay close and follow precisely, he instructed Benjamin and Robert. The tunnels connect to the panic room through a passage only I can access. The tunnel system was surprisingly modern LED lighting, ventilation, and security cameras monitoring every segment. They moved swiftly through the underground network, emerging eventually into a hidden utility room within the main house. The secure wing is 2 floors up, Maxwell explained, checking a tablet that displayed security camera feeds. Gas has dissipated, but 2 intruders remain active, searching room by room. Police tactical team is 3 minutes out. Robert peered at the tablet. That's Daniel Carter, he said suddenly, pointing to one of the armed men. Victoria's lawyer. I knew he was shady, but this... Maxwell's expression hardened. Carter's involvement elevates this from abduction to conspiracy. He's risking his law license and freedom. He wouldn't do that without significant incentive, Benjamin noted. This confirms the vendetta theory. Vanessa Mitchell has been planning this for years, positioning her pieces carefully. A notification appeared on Maxwell's tablet, a direct message from the panic room. Mrs. Reynolds had activated the emergency communication system. Mr. Grant, came her tense voice. They're using some kind of thermal imaging to locate the panic room. I estimate 5 minutes before they pinpoint us. Understood. We're on site. Maintain position. Maxwell studied the security feeds, formulating a plan. Jensen, status of your team. 3 men wounded, none critically. Remaining personnel have retreated to defensive positions per protocol. Maxwell made his decision. Robert Benjamin, you'll remain here. I'm going to create a diversion, draw Carter and his accomplice away from the panic room long enough for the tactical team to enter. That's suicide, Benjamin objected. These are trained killers. They want me alive, Maxwell countered. Vanessa's vendetta requires my suffering, not my death. He turned to Robert. If anything happens to me, Benjamin has documentation making him Emma's legal guardian. He'll ensure her safety. Robert shook his head vehemently. No, I'm coming with you. I got Emma into this mess by trusting Victoria. I need to help get her out. Maxwell assessed Robert's determination. Despite his disheveled appearance and alcohol dependence, there was a resurgence of the man Catherine had once loved, the father Emma remembered. Very well, Maxwell agreed reluctantly, but you follow my lead exactly. Benjamin, monitor the security feeds. Guide the tactical team when they arrive. Maxwell and Robert moved stealthily through the house, using service corridors to avoid detection. As they approached the secure wing, the acrid smell of CS gas lingered faintly. Carter will expect me to come from below, Maxwell whispered. We'll approach from the east stairwell instead. They reached the secure wing's outer door, finding it partially destroyed by breaching charges. Inside, furniture was overturned, artwork shattered, clear evidence of the violent intrusion. Through his earpiece, Maxwell heard Benjamin's warning. Carter and the other intruder are approaching Emma's bedroom, 50 feet from your position. Get ready, Maxwell told Robert. When I engage them, circle around to the panic room entrance. The code is Emma's birth date, 04-15-16. Robert nodded, surprising Maxwell with his sudden clarity and focus. Perhaps the threat to his daughter had burned through the alcoholic haze that had clouded his judgment for months. Maxwell moved purposefully into the corridor, making no attempt at stealth now. Carter, he called out, his voice echoing through the devastated space. Your employer has already lost in court. This attack will only ensure she spends the rest of her life in prison. Carter and his accomplice spun toward Maxwell's voice, weapons raised. The lawyer's expensive suit was incongruous with the tactical gear and pistol he now wielded. Grant Carter acknowledged, a cold smile distorting his once handsome features. How convenient. Ms. Mitchell will be pleased I've secured both targets. Maxwell took a calculated step forward. Kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy, impressive resume, additions for a Harvard Law graduate. Was it worth destroying your career? Carter's smile faltered slightly. Some causes transcend professional considerations. The Mitchells were like family to me. Edward's death destroyed them. Vanessa deserves justice. Justice, Maxwell's voice hardened. Is poisoning Catherine justice, abusing a 6-year-old child? Your moral compass is severely compromised, counselor. As Maxwell kept Carter engaged, Robert slipped around the periphery of the confrontation, moving toward the panic room as planned. The second intruder noticed, swinging his weapon toward Robert. Stop right there, he commanded. Maxwell seized the distraction, lunging forward to disarm Carter with a precise strike to his wrist. The lawyer's gun clattered to the floor as Maxwell drove him against the wall, forearm pressed against his throat. You're finished, Carter, Maxwell growled. The only question is whether you leave here in handcuffs or a body bag. The second intruder turned his weapon toward Maxwell, but hesitated, unwilling to risk hitting Carter. That moment of indecision proved fatal as the tactical team burst through the western entrance, weapons trained on the intruder. Police, drop your weapon. In the chaos that followed, Robert reached the panic room and entered the code. The reinforced door opened to reveal Mrs. Reynolds protecting Emma behind her, a small but determined figure clutching a fire extinguisher as improvised defense. Daddy? Emma's voice, small and uncertain, cut through the tactical team's commands and the second intruder's surrender. Robert fell to his knees before her. Emma, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. His voice broke as tears streamed down his face. I failed you. I let her turn me against you. Emma stood frozen, conflicting emotions battling across her features, longing, hurt, confusion, hope. Then, with the resilience only children possess, she dropped the extinguisher and threw her arms around her father's neck. You came back, she whispered, the simple statement, encompassing forgiveness and tentative reconciliation. Maxwell, having secured Carter, watched this reunion with complex emotions of his own. The protective instinct that had driven him these past days hadn't diminished yet. Seeing Emma reunited with her father, a father now awakened to his responsibilities, filled a void he hadn't acknowledged. As the tactical team secured the area, Benjamin approached, eyeing the subdued Carter with professional interest. Detective Howard will be pleased. With Carter in custody, the entire conspiracy unravels. And Victoria, Vanessa, Maxwell asked. Arrested, leaving the courthouse, Benjamin confirmed. Apparently, she made the mistake of threatening Judge Marshall directly after the hearing. The judge had her detained for contempt, which kept her in custody while this played out. Maxwell nodded satisfaction, tempered by awareness of how close disaster had come. And the board? Calling nonstop, Uya, Benjamin replied dryly. Apparently, news of an armed assault on the CEO's residence affects stock prices. Funny how their priorities clarify in crisis. Emergency medical technicians had arrived, attending to Jensen's security team and checking Emma and Mrs. Reynolds for injuries. Robert remained by his daughter's side, holding her hand as if afraid she might disappear. Maxwell approached them cautiously. Emma looked up, her eyes brightening. Mr. Grant, you came back just like you promised. I always keep my promises, Emma, Maxwell replied, his usual formality softened. Robert stood, extending his hand. Grant, I don't know how to thank you. You protected my daughter when I failed her. Maxwell accepted the handshake with reserved acknowledgement. Emma deserves better than either of us has provided. Moving forward, that must change. It will, Robert vowed, a new determination evident beneath his haggard appearance. I'm checking into rehab tonight. Benjamin has arranged everything. 30 days inpatient, followed by ongoing treatment and monitoring. Maxwell's skepticism must have shown because Robert continued earnestly. I know words mean nothing now, but I will earn back her trust and yours. Catherine would expect nothing less. The mention of Catherine sobered them both. Her murder had been confirmed, justice now in motion, but her absence remained an irreplaceable void in Emma's life. What happens now? Emma asked, looking between the two men who had in different ways become her protectors. Maxwell knelt to her level, finding the gesture increasingly natural. The court has placed you in my temporary custody while your father receives treatment. When he's ready, we'll establish a visitation schedule proceeding at whatever pace makes you comfortable. So I'll still live with you, Emma clarified, but I can see Dad too. Exactly, Maxwell confirmed. Mrs. Reynolds has already begun arranging repairs to the secure wing. Your room will be restored within days. Emma considered this arrangement thoughtfully. What about Penji? He got scared during the attack. Maxwell's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Penji is welcome, of course. In fact, I believe Mrs. Reynolds has already located him. As if on cue, the housekeeper appeared, Penji securely in hand. Emma accepted the stuffed penguin, gratefully hugging it to her chest. Detective Howard would like statements from everyone, Benjamin announced, approaching the group. Standard procedure after an incident of this magnitude. The next hours passed in organized chaos, police statements, medical examinations, security assessments. Throughout it all, Maxwell observed Emma's resilience with growing admiration. She answered questions, clearly accepted comfort from both her father and Maxwell without apparent conflict, and even managed to charm Detective Howard with her precise observations of the intruders. By evening, the immediate crisis had passed. Victoria and Carter remained in custody, facing charges ranging from attempted kidnapping to first-degree murder. Robert had departed for the rehabilitation facility, a tearful but hopeful goodbye, with Emma marking the beginning of his long road to redemption. In the library of Grant Manor, now serving as a temporary gathering space, while the secure wing underwent repairs, Maxwell sat with Emma and Benjamin, reviewing the day's developments. Victoria will likely face life imprisonment, Benjamin explained gently to Emma. The evidence your mother gathered combined with today's events leaves little doubt of her guilt. Emma nodded solemnly. Mom knew something was wrong. She kept telling me to be careful around Victoria, but I didn't understand why. Your mother was protecting you the best way she could, Maxwell assured her. She documented everything to ensure the truth would eventually emerge. Like chess, Emma said suddenly, she was thinking moves ahead even when she was sick. Maxwell nodded, appreciating the apt comparison. Precisely. Your mother understood that sometimes victory requires sacrifice and patience. As Benjamin departed to coordinate with the district attorney's office, Maxwell found himself alone with Emma. The child appeared exhausted but curiously settled, as if the day's resolution had released a tension she'd carried for months. Mr. Grant, she began hesitantly, now that Dad's getting help, will you still want me here? The question revealed her underlying fear that Maxwell's protection had been merely duty rather than choice. He considered his response carefully, wanting neither to mislead nor diminish the commitment he'd made. Emma, you will always have a place in my home regardless of your father's progress. These past days have... He paused, searching for words that felt foreign to his vocabulary. They've reminded me what it means to have purpose beyond business success. Emma studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to read beyond his carefully constructed facade. You've been lonely too, she observed simply. Maxwell didn't deny it. Perhaps we've helped each other in that regard. Mom would be happy, Emma declared with childlike certainty. She always said you needed someone to care about. As Emma drifted towards sleep in the comfortable library chair Penji clutched securely in her arms, Maxwell contemplated the profound changes a single week had wrought in his carefully controlled existence. His home, once a showcase of solitary success, had become the battleground for a child's future, and perhaps unexpectedly, for his own redemption from grief-imposed isolation. Outside, the repaired security systems hummed with renewed vigilance. Inside, a child slept peacefully, trusting in protection that would not fail. Between these boundaries, Maxwell Grant acknowledged a truth he'd denied for a decade. Family, with all its complications and vulnerabilities, remained the only true wealth worth protecting. He lifted Emma gently, carrying her toward the guest suite that would serve until her room was restored. The child barely stirred, instinctively nestling against his shoulder in complete trust. Sleep well, Emma, he murmured, settling her carefully on the bed. Tomorrow begins a new chapter for both of us. As Maxwell closed her door, leaving it slightly ajar as she preferred, he felt a peculiar lightness, as if in protecting this child he had also begun to salvage something long thought lost within himself. The storm had passed, damages would be repaired, and somewhere he imagined Catherine Wilson watching over her daughter with the same fierce protectiveness that had driven her to document her own murder, ensuring justice would eventually prevail. Maxwell returned to his study where reports awaited his attention and a world of business concerns demanded decisions. Yet for the first time in tenure, Grant Empire no longer represented his sole purpose. A more fundamental responsibility had emerged, not replacing his lost family, but creating something new from the ashes of that tragedy. He glanced at the old photograph on his desk, Elizabeth, Sophia, and Catherine smiling in happier times. Then he looked toward Emma's room where a new generation slept peacefully under his protection. "I will not fail her," he promised the quiet room. And this time the vow felt not like obligation, but like grace.